Please welcome to the stage Marshal Kosloff and District Attorney Brooke Jenkins.
So this is an incredibly exciting opportunity for me personally, because in many ways this panel is a sequel to a conversation I had last year where we were talking about stories and narratives and what happens in politics and messaging that goes beyond polling and data. And I wrote a piece about this, and the district attorney actually read the piece. I've never had an interviewee actually do prep, so that's really huge. But it means that we can kind of get a little deeper on these themes because they're really reflective of a lot of tensions and dynamics that exist within this sort of convening. So we were discussing before we went on stage, and you talked about a slogan that you delivered when you were running in 2022, but I think is like the critical part that we start. So how about you just share the story and share what the slogan was?
So for those of you who have not been following San Francisco politics, we recalled our prior district attorney in 2022, who was a very progressive prosecutor who did not believe in prosecution. And I was appointed by our mayor after that recall election and then ran for re-election immediately. And during my campaigning, when I was trying to introduce people to who I was, because they didn't know, right, I had been appointed, I said, there's one thing I want to make clear to everybody here. All crime is illegal again in San Francisco. And so that was what I wanted them to know, is that we weren't going to allow a free-for-all, and there would be consequences for crime, and that was my way of making that plain and clear to them.
The thing I appreciated with your reading the piece and engaging with the thought is I spent a lot of time taking Build the Wall seriously, but not literally, because especially in the wonky spaces that tend to inhabit these type of convenings, it's easy to sort of like critique it on moral terms, obviously, right. But it wasn't serious policy. But from a pure perspective of how can an idea or a candidate have something like make sense to people that is going to resonate, that is going to be felt, there was something really there. And then if you take Build the Wall, seriously, there were actually policies that came out of that. Yeah. So hearing this from you, I have the same feeling that I had of Build the Wall. Once again, not in moral terms, but just sort of clear, direct, I knock on my neighbor's door, I could say that is what your deal is. Obviously, though, there's a limit. Like, it's not that crime was literally legal in San Francisco, which is sort of where people in these spaces tend to sort of stop, like, well, is that true? And you're sort of exaggerating. So like, how do you think about like just having the confidence just to like say something if it just makes sense to someone, even if it's not just like the perfectly most sort of articulatable thing?
So on the first panel this morning, there was some talk about there being too many lawyers in politics. But let me tell you, I was a trial lawyer. Right? I was a prosecutor. And one thing you have to do as a trial lawyer is help a jury of average, everyday people understand complex legal topics. Help them understand a theme to wrap their head around for your case. And I don't think it's much different in the arena I'm in now. You have to give people a theme. It doesn't have to be literal necessarily, but you have to help them understand a framework of an issue or a topic and then wrap their head around what you stand for as it relates to that topic. And so for me, that was crime. And it felt like crime was legal in San Francisco under the last district attorney. It felt like there were no consequences. Maybe there were some, for some things and none for others. We don't mean literally there was no prosecution, but it felt as though there was none. And so it's capitalizing on that feeling that people had of, wait, it feels like crime is legal around here. People are just doing whatever they want. And making them understand, okay, I've tapped into that feeling, and now I want you to understand what my platform is, which is that there will be consequences and accountability. And so it was, for me, merging those two, and I'm a firm believer that unless we reach the lay person, the average person, with a message that they can wrap their head around very quickly, we lose them.
I think the thing that's hard is I think everyone knows they need to make a slogan, they need to have some sort of messaging, they know they need to get to people, but they typically resolve to keep it riskless, keep things safe, keep things simple. It doesn't mean anything, but that's why it works. Like, yours obviously meant something. So I think a lot of folks here aren't going to be, DAs and aren't going to focus on crime, but I think they're going to have the tension of how do we actually take the risk of saying something that could be controversial and just sort of pushes on that. So talk through, did you come up with that slogan? Did your team talk it through? Was a consultant sort of scared? Did a voter sort of laughing at it make you reluctant? Like at a personal level, how did you think about doing that?
I've seen a lot of DAs have the slogans that have, justice for all. I mean, that doesn't resonate with anyone, right? That doesn't excite you. It doesn't get your blood flowing. For me, it's about a rallying cry. People need to feel inspired. And I was coming into office at a time when San Francisco was hopeless. I needed to give them hope. And hope sometimes requires you to say things that are a little bit controversial. And if you know anything about San Francisco, it was a bit controversial to say all crime is illegal again. There was a faction who felt that was inflammatory. Like, how dare you? You must be, like I was telling you earlier, you must be a Republican to say something like that. I'm like, no, I think everyone wants safety. And so for me, it's about standing firm on what you believe and being bold enough to say the things that everyone is thinking, but is scared to say because they don't want to be mischaracterized or put in a box or called something that they don't like. We have to be, if you want to be in one of these elected offices, you need to be bold enough to actually stand up and say what people want. And so that's why I thought, for me, it was about the slogan. I didn't come up with that. It was actually a regular person. It wasn't a consultant. It was nothing political. It was just like, hey, man, do you realize like you've made all crime illegal again in San Francisco? And I was like, wait, that's brilliant. And I went with it.
So obviously, where build the wall fails is when you take one step down. The wall is not built, the policies aren't popular, there's a lot of backlash. So it's not that you can just sort of coast on a slogan that gets you into office. You actually have to be able to sort of have actual ideas, actual policies under it. So what did you actually do when you came into, when you were actually elected, sort of to take that from slogan to like actual reality that people felt?
Well, yes. I mean, I think I told people, right? This is what I stand for. Here's how I'm going to get it done. And I wanted to, for me, pick the things that I thought people were most inflamed about. So that has to do with crime, right? And in San Francisco, it was auto burglary, and it was retail theft, most especially, and it was fentanyl dealing, open-air drug markets. Tapping into those things that they were the angriest about and saying, here for each of them is what I'm going to do about it to make it better. Because that's what people needed to hear. And so I think you're right. A slogan is not enough. We have enough performative politics all over this country. It has to be that it's followed by performance and success and having metrics and a plan and being able to, again, get out of the weeds and explain to people what your plan is in a way that they can digest and understand very easily. And so that for me was like, okay, auto burglary, here's what we're going to do. Fentanyl dealers, I know they've been running amok around the city and no DA has ever asked for a drug dealer to be held in custody pre-trial, but this is so bad that that's what I'm going to do because we've had 800 overdose deaths. So I'm going to be bold enough to say, Judge, these guys selling this death on our streets have to stay in custody. And people could wrap their heads around that. They were like, yes, yeah, the fentanyl dealers should stay in. You're right. And being able to just, like I said, reduce that down to that like simplistic form and explain it to them. And again, get people riled up about it is what has been effective along with getting it actually done.
So part of the reason why I think storytelling is important is because when you have skeptical voters, so like you're in San Francisco, so it's less that you need to beat a Republican, it's more that there's like, factional conflict. But I think if a voter is skeptical, being able to articulate how we got here, what's happening, how do you play into that, like how have you learned, how can you do better, et cetera, is a critical way to build trust. So I would just be curious, if you're confronting a skeptical voter in 2022, what would you have said happened not just in San Francisco, but with our general discourse and sort of policy conceptions of how we handle issues of crime and criminal justice? For me, it was ideology took over.
It was ideology over performance. And that, to me, is what this far-left movement has been. It's a lot of ideological speak without it being backed up by competence and success. And really helping people identify that. And like, that sounds really great, doesn't it? It sounds fluffy, you know, hug the drug dealer and tell him to stop and he'll just stop. It doesn't work that way. And reducing it down to the truth. And I think when you confront people with the truth and the fact that this isn't about fluff and making you feel good, you want your street clean. You don't want to walk through what you're walking through anymore, right? And they're like, yeah. But you know, what I say to people too who say, oh, well, San Francisco's just, you know, there's no Republicans, you're just fighting, it's an inner fight between Democrats. Yeah, that's where we're at in our party nationally. It's a fight. It's a fight for who is going to own the identity of our party. And is it going to be the DSA? Is it going to be the radical left who's talking all about ideology? Or is it going to be the pragmatic people who want to see people's lives improve and it's about performance? But we have to message it right. And so I say, yeah, this is an internal fight, you're right. But unless we win that internal fight on this side, we're going to keep losing to Republicans.
So I really like, in the context of San Francisco, your point about pragmatism and getting things done. And I'm not asking you to speak ill of a fellow California politician, but I think the problem of hearing how much your statement just resonated is, if we look at the California governor's primary last night, Matt Mahan obviously made the same sort of pragmatic, get things done sort of pitch. And it's not just him. Like, you know, I do a lot of work in the abundance space, and there was a lot of attempts to sort of do that sort of technocratic, we get things done, our left opponents are ideological people, but it just doesn't resonate. So is there something about crime that makes this unique? Because or maybe this is just sort of a talent question. Because I just think we've sort of tested the like centrist or the pragmatist sort of theory. And when it comes to social media, when it comes to all these like different categories, it just hasn't seemed to have been as effective as I would have expected 2 years ago.
It can't be boring. It cannot be boring. And I've found that, yes, crime might be the easier topic because crime is something that we all care about. I don't care who you are passionate if your car gets broken into. You are passionate if somebody breaks into your house. You are passionate if you live in a community riddled with gun violence. That makes you mad. It makes you upset. You're traumatized. There's a lot of feeling about it. And so it's us figuring out how we prioritize issues that people are excited about, people are passionate about, people can get incensed about. That is why, to me, the far left has been able to be successful. They rally cry around things that get people worked up. When I think of defund the police, people got worked up about George Floyd. People got it was like, yes, and I need somewhere to channel what I'm feeling. Somebody needs to give me something to anchor onto. It can't be boring. It has to be, though, that the way I did it with crime was to say, hey, you're mad about how your street looks outside of your house, aren't you? You're mad that when you go into Walgreens, everything is locked up on those shelves, aren't you? Because I know I'm frustrated about it. So, don't you want that to stop? Don't you want to be able to walk in Target and buy toothpaste without having to ring that bell and wait 10 minutes? For the store associate, because I'm sick of it. And my kid is throwing a tantrum right now while we wait. So the way that we fix that is we hold the people who keep stealing accountable. That was what got people worked up. They were like, yes, I want my life back. I'm sick of having to get my window repaired because we had 30,000 auto burglaries in a year in San Francisco. And so it's about picking the topic and not just saying justice for all, we stand for public safety, because that means nothing. It's tapping into the core of what makes that issue matter to people. If it's housing, it's saying, aren't you tired of not being able to buy a house, not being able to afford a house? Isn't it unfair that you are a teacher and you can't afford to live where you work, right? And tapping into that, but then saying, and here is a simplified way of how I'm gonna solve that problem for you, what I think the solution is. But we keep picking these like fluffy topics, safe topics. We take for granted that as long as I now say public safety, everybody's on board. That's not true. There has to be something, like I said, that taps into people's passion, makes them want to get out and fight, because we need people to fight with us.
So I understand the context by which you're using the word ideology as like a bad thing, like not being pragmatic, just sort of saying like, this is my way, this is the highway. But I think something that centrist spaces tend to underrate is that like ideology is also kind of like a way that you think about things, right? It's kind of like software on your hardware. So like when something happens, ideology makes it easier for me to think about things. So like when 2020 happened, like let's say I was running for office, I didn't put out any terrible tweets because like I think police should exist, and I think police should exist not just because a poll showed that to me, but because I've like thought about like policing and its role in society. So how do you think about how centrists or even politicians who are sort of like vulnerable to sort of being influenced into believing things that they wouldn't believe if you locked them in a room for 30 minutes, how should you think about how centrism should think about crime? Because I think the thing that's tough is that like 2020 was happening as the culminating point over like 10 years of discourse on racial justice, on policing, on the fact that we were taking weapons and vehicles from the war in Iraq and bringing them back, and people just sort of felt that. So like, I think we should be more, not like sympathetic because it was a judgment question, but like, I understand how you got there, especially if you're not thinking hard about it. So how do you think about crime? I guess you don't have to use the word ideology, but I'm just curious, like, how should we think about crime today?
So I think, I just want to tap into something you said, which is I think we as centrists are more susceptible to being pulled one direction or the other. Right? If you are far left, you're never, for the most part, gonna end up like on the right side. You're pretty much entrenched way over to the extreme. But when you're kind of in the middle, it's like, well, this argument came from the left and everybody seems to like it, so like I can paddle left. Oh, this argument from the right seems to be popular. Okay, like I can paddle to the right a little bit and I can still call myself in the middle. We can't fall victim to that. And I think our job is to say, wait, I know everybody's worked up, but let's remember reality. And that's what I did on crime. I'm like, hey, look, I'm black. I've seen all the shootings. George Floyd was murdered along with a string of other black men and women over the last number of years. I acknowledge that, I see it, I don't stand for it, I'm against it, 100%. I believe in the accountability for all of those police officers. But do you want a society with no police? Do you want a neighborhood with nobody to enforce laws? I don't. And I went into the black community and they're like, no, we want police, we want more police. We want fair and just police, proper policing. And it's calling that out. It's saying, hey, everybody, hold on. I know that sounds sexy. Reality check. And I think you have to be bold enough to do that reality check, because once you get people back to the foundation, they're like, oh yeah, wait, that's right. Oh, I don't have to scream defund. It's still acceptable for me to like believe that police should exist? Yes, it is. And it doesn't, as I've said, make you a racist or a Republican.
So we focused a lot on crime, but I want to go back to something you said earlier. You referred to, there's a fight for the Democratic Party. What do you think the Democratic Party, and it's kind of interesting because like different speakers have different positions on this topic today. Some people are very comfortable with the Democratic Party being a coalition, and I'm heterodox or I'm a centrist, and then there are people on the left and we're in different districts, but you seem to be talking pretty singularly about the Democratic Party as like an identity. So how do you think about just like that challenge of like, should there be a thing, or are we just sort of, I want to be fair when I say this, like individuals doing our own thing and then like maybe we agree sometimes? Like, how do you think about this question?
I think it's a singular identity, because that's how people who are voting look at it. They don't separate us. They vote Democrat or they vote Republican, right? And right now it's like MAGA or nothing. MAGA is the identity right now of the Republican Party. Whether they all like that or not, that's what it is. And we have to have a core identity that people can lock onto and have faith in. Not like, well, we're a hodgepodge of a lot of different beliefs and you don't know what you're gonna get. I don't wanna vote for anything or anyone if this is like a risk, if it's Russian roulette with like what you're gonna do with my life or what you stand for. I want to know what you stand for. And I think that that's been what Trump's success has been grounded in. Whether we disagree with him or not, people are like, I know what I'm gonna get from him. I know what he stands for. It could be racist, it could be crazy, but I know what it is. But with you over here, I'm like, are we gonna get the 2020 version of you or the 2024 version of you or where are you? And I think we have to fight for a singular identity.
So it's impossible to get a perfect answer to every single part of it. What would be those core points of the identity from your perspective?
For me, it's, again, those foundational things, which are safety, making sure that when we say the word, people's lives need to be affordable, what that means, right? When we talk about inflation, again, inflation is a term that a lot of people don't understand. We have a lot of, English as a second language people in our country. They're like, what? We have all kinds of things. We have people who, just aren't in the weeds on what these terms mean, but helping them understand when we say affordable, we mean bringing down the prices of your groceries. But I'm not just gonna say that because it sounds great. Here's how I'm going to do that. When we talk about healthcare, it can't just be like, I think everybody should have healthcare. Of course we think everybody should have healthcare. But like, what is a reasonable platform for how we pay for healthcare for people? That is, and how we hit these key points and we all rally again behind what is pragmatic and makes sense. And that's what I found in San Francisco. People want our economy to thrive. People want safety. People want to be able to pay less rent, buy a place to live, normal things that afford us the American dream. I think we need to get back to like, what is the American dream? How do I make people see a vision for themselves in having that? But that's not grounded in, again, like fluff, but in everyday reality.
So different factions of the Democratic Party have like different articulations of like where there's dissent or like where maybe we agree on these foundations, but we're gonna sort of debate at the edges. I'm curious where you think the edges are. So for example, something that more centrist aligned orgs have talked about is like, we need to win a Senate majority, we need to win a House majority, so there are gonna be these people who are gonna make you uncomfortable, whether it's on abortion or whether it's on immigration, all these like different issues. And it's been really fascinating to see the base of the Democratic Party become less and less enthralled by that sort of pragmatic argument, and more just sort of like less emotionally motivated by MGP gives us the chance of a majority, but she voted for that ICE bill. So like, it's just been a dynamic that I think it's been interesting to observe. So like, how do you think about like in the centrist case, like those people who exist a little outside of that foundation and the need to get a majority?
I think it's fine. I think you have to explain why you do things. Again, I find myself in San Francisco. I had somebody tell me the other day, like, I can't fit you in a box. You're like talking about, accountability, and I'm complaining about a court ruling that doesn't let me detain people enough pre-trial that just came out. But then the next day I'm at a prison saying like we should embrace more resentencing of people who have really long, sentences and have rehabilitated themselves and deserve to be out. And then he's like, how do I reconcile this? And I'm like, because the two are not opposing. So let me explain. And I think we just have to do a better job of that. And I think those people can exist where maybe they voted on something that, people are scratching their heads and saying like, oh, where did that come from? Explain it. We're not gonna agree with every single decision. Nobody agrees with every single thing I do, but they can respect my mindset if I explain it to them. Or at least say, okay, we're not with her on that, but I'm with her on a majority of other things. And that's all right. I think we can get there, but people have to do a lot more talking.
So a yellow flag raises when someone describes themselves to me as sort of hard to, put in a box. Because there's like the good version of that, and then there's a bad version, because, my podcast is called The Realignment, and it's really studying how left and right have shifted. And if we look at, because you said that, far left people don't go far right, that's very much not true. And it was funny to interview a lot of these people, midway through those transformations, because they would start saying, you can't put me in a box, and then they're just far right the next year, because it was sort of a halfway point to sort of explain that transformation. So that's one version, but the other version is also, you can't put me in a box and I'm all over the place, not because I'm rooted and strong and I'm a pragmatic, critical thinker about different issues, but just because I wake up every day not knowing what I think. So I'm a different person, and that's why this is there. So how do you, and I trust that you are maintaining the good version of hard to put in a box, but how should we just think about this? Because I see more people who are the bad versions than people who are the good versions.
Oh, 100%. So when I said you can't put me in a box, it was more along the lines of, yes, I'm a critical thinker on each individual issue. And so the fact that I stand for accountability does not mean I cannot support what I think are safe and responsible reforms, right, in the criminal justice context. What I don't mean, and what I don't like, and what has to change about our party is the don't put me in a box because I wake up today and what's popular is X, so therefore I stand for X, and then a year from now it's Y, and now I'm saying I stand for Y because now that's popular. Or backtracking on your convictions because you're scared that maybe people won't roll with you this time. I think we have to be a party that stands for something, right, and stands for the right thing, and has elected officials that don't waver. The political winds will blow, left, right, and every other direction. And in the midst of that, you have to have your feet grounded in what you believe. It doesn't mean that somebody can't persuade you ultimately to change your mind at some point, but that shouldn't be happening on every issue. And it shouldn't be because we all know that the pendulum is swinging, and so you're just moving with the pendulum. And I think I've seen far too much of that over the last number of years, that 1 minute you stand for this and then the next minute it's something completely different on the same topic, and that can't happen.
The final question is really, and we've seen this already in primaries for Congress, but also in 2028 candidates, a lot of people, in 2020 took positions that they no longer hold. And let's just assume those were taking in good faith and now they've evolved and changed. So you are not in the position of having to have that problem. But I'm just curious how you think folks should think about and handle that, because you're seeing several models. So one, the tortured explanation, the ignore it model, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But if this is a trust era, if this is a backlash era, how do you think about that sort of challenge?
That's a difficult question for me to ask because I'm not somebody who moves off of what I believe. So if somebody has done that, then I do think they have explaining to do. I don't think it should be ignored. I don't think it should be ignored at all from voters because, again, or from our party, we need to know what you stand for. And we will continue to lose unless we know what people stand for. And so for that reason, I think we need to be looking for leaders who have been unwavering, right, in their commitment to always standing for what they believe is best for their community, for their state, and for this nation. That's just me.
And on that note, we will wrap things up. Thank you so much.